And good morning. And the march here is turning into the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. We're talking about here is the Dancing Hare. So, okay, the updates on this are pretty funny in a way. Funny and not funny. Bunch of people turn around on Facebook and social media and they're talking about the Ibsine boat. We call it the Ibsine boat. Dancing Hare is in Auckland. This has been on the news. We all know this material. I've done stories on it. If you want to find out actually, what is interesting about this boat, but I'll get into that later. Um, the key thing today is the developments that the fire department turned down. They were pumping cyanide out, and they were going, "Oh my God, they're poisoning people! Oh my God, oh my God!" Well, nobody actually, and they even managed to get one of the firemen on video, apparently saying that it had cyanide. I haven't seen the footage, or anything that makes me say, well, actually that is the case. But what I did do was I rang the regional headquarters actually, and I spoke to Richard Twomey, and he explained to me what actually is happening is that the first issue is what these guys haven't got right is that where they're actually extracting cyanide from is not on the wharf property, it's actually next to it. I think it's called the Wynyard, it's part of the Wynyard location or something like that. But what they're actually, that is all reclaimed land which has had all sorts of nasty things built on it, and it leaches material. And so this is actually what they've come down to actually get out. So that's what the source of the cyanide actually is. It's this area is built on industrial land that has all sorts of nasty fucking chemicals in it. There is another interesting aspect about this aspect of it, which is I spoke to John Matlin, who is the Soul Marina, the guy that is in charge of that, and he was not he was cooperative, but he wasn't willing to sort of say too much about his clients or anything like that, which is actually fairly standard. And basically, what I found of them, what I did find out of them, which is amongst all this, what I really wanted to find out was what's happening with America's Cup, because of course this is going to be the big party event in December, and this is where all news and our media attention is going to focus about what's happening on America's Cup, America's Cup, America's Cup. Now at the moment, a lot of these boats have arrived ahead of schedule. They've got the crews there. They've got people coming into Auckland that are their fixers to find out, where they can find good hotels and good night spots and all the things that you want to find to make sure that your billionaires have a good time when they're in New Zealand. Which all of that stuff is actually really interesting because it does get to the issue of the serious part of the story is, well, these people come in during lockdown situation and they seem to be getting kind of like VIP treatment, which, that's the sort of story like, well, how come they guys can come in as they like, but other people can't, and the rest of us all got these sort of constraints put onto us. As far as he's concerned, the America's Cup is still, that's John Matlin, the America's Cup is still going ahead, which of course begs the question of, well, should we, should this event be going ahead when all these other events are being closed down because of this risk of this coronavirus situation? So that's the real issue behind there is the two-tier system going on here, which VIPs seem to get certain treatment and other ones don't. The other thing which is interesting is that the international media have got hold of the story. The local media have been on site, but no one's really saying anything about this group of protesters, which number, according to John Matlin, there's been about 50 people have been at the peak of it, but it's been normally about 20 people have been coming and going. And they're all adding to their little breathlessly on Facebook. And you see the other video I did before this one about Dancing Hare, what's true, what's not, what's been exaggerated. But they're making out claims like, for example, that Interpol has arrived. Well, where's your source for that? If you're going to make a claim, you've got to have something to back it up. But this group of people don't actually seem to want to be able to do that. And the thing that actually got me blocked off the sites, the key ones are pushing this, is the fact that I signaled that one of the people that pointed out that they were down, they said, oh yes, the marshals are down there. And I went, well, we don't have marshals, so who are these marshals? So I did a bit of digging and discovered that they're a group called the United Nations Marshals. And that's United Nation, not United Nations. Now this is a sovereignty group which has come out of Hawaii, and I'm working on another story which relates to, see back of my shoulder there, that's State Secrets 2. The first book, State Secrets 1, I talked about these sovereignty groups in the 1980s, which were being, basically, they were being used as leverage. So, for example, you had the case of the Mare Loans affair, where basically during that peak time was during the anti-nuclear period. We were threatening to go anti-nuclear. We started having issues with so-called radicals and extremists, and basically they were linked to these sovereignty groups, which was effectively the CIA kind of leaning on New Zealand, kind of going, well, if you don't play ball, we'll start stirring shit up there. Well, these are the same kind of groups that are now turning up into this United Nations group. Stories have been done about this in the past. They turned up originally in the Waitangi festivals about 2015, thereabouts. And they were the king and queen of Hawaii, which I think, I don't know the legitimacy about the king and queen. Apparently they might be a real group, but the group that's latched onto them, not so credible. Highlighted by the fact that the bodyguard of the king and the queen at the time was a guy called known as Chock, or Wayne Doyson. I'll figure out the correct name and put that down on the links of the stories I've done in the past, which again, I've done Facebook pages on this. And he was a sergeant at arms with the headhunters and a hitman who was the man that they were attributing to be the bodyguard. So basically what I pointed out was that the United Nations had links to the headhunters group. So that's very interesting. Seems to be that there seems to be a certain group within this group that have been there connected to this United Nations group that seem to be stirring the story actually up. Interesting enough is the international media that's actually published this to begin with is the Sun, which is real page 3 titties and titties tabloid stuff. It's owned by by the Murdochs, and that's where it does get interesting, because the Murdochs, when that boat was here in January when I did the story, and that's the point I'm saying, like, I'm going, well, I wrote the story in January, and I think in February actually I published it, and I've been doing, going back to the story because it's been this boat, other boats have been coming into New Zealand, airplanes have been arriving and offloading various people, most of which we'll get into that in a second, but we'll stick to this point about the Murdochs. The boats that were actually next to the Dancin Hare when it arrived in January and February were the Samurai, and that's Sierra Alpha Mike Yankee Alpha, and the other one, which God is, I'll just spell it, and that's India Papa India X-Ray Mike Alpha. Now that particular boat, I confirmed solidly, belongs to Larnock Murdoch, and that's the son of Rupert Murdoch, who owns the Sun. That's now pushing this Dancing Hare story. So they're using the story to sell newspapers. The yacht was the Samurai, that's the SAMYA one. Now, we weren't able to confirm completely that was owned by the Murdochs. We were simply able to manage to confirm that it came out of the same boat management groups that managed their particular boats. It came out from Australia, and it was set up for media and a lot of sort of Agenda 2030, oh my God, their version of climate change. And I'm not getting into the whole issue about whether I think climate change is true or not, because that's not the point. But the point is, Larnock Murdoch is very much tied up with that group of people, which, like Maxwell, is also tied into that story. So that's part of the story which probably is worth commenting on, and that can, and I say that because these are the parts of the story which can actually be confirmed. These are allegations where you can say, here's the link, here's the documentation, and these are the things which can actually be backed up. So that's kind of interesting, because they've now turned around and put the story, and they're putting in a $10,000 reward for anyone who can find Maxwell. So basically, it looks like the Murdoch papers are going to stir the shit out of this one, and they're going to use it to bump up their own ratings. And this group has just very kindly kind of obliged them. The boats that I pointed out in my previous ones are the ones that I've been, and the aircrafts I've been, talking about, have been arriving in here. It's like the one that's currently down next there at the moment is the Rocinante, which again, it's owned by the same boat company that currently owns the boat. Well, it's owned by it was built by the same company that built Jeff Bezos from Amazon's other boat, the Flying Fox. So that's one way we connect it to Amazon. The other part was, of course, that Jeff Bezos' favourite series is the TV series The Expanse, which he's got hugely involved in. Lots of references in The Expanse to Jeff Bezos' own plans for space program. And the key core hero of that particular series, The Expanse, is the Rocinante. So again, we sort of, from that viewpoint, saying, well, this is interesting. There's a lot of overlaps to Amazon with that particular boat. more easy next to that one, of course, is the Sensors, which is the boat owned by Larry Page from Google. Google's down here in New Zealand at the moment. They're working with New Zealand because they want to create this drone system, which is going to have basically nationwide air taxi systems, which is all run by drones, which require huge AI, which is really cool because Google's down here at the moment and they want to build a big database centre in Wellington. So that's another New Zealand connection, which can be confirmed. These are things that actually there's material which backs the stuff up, and that's the stuff we should be focusing on because that's the stuff we can prove. Saying that the things like which is happening in this other group, which is tied to the United Nations, that this is the last boat that Maxwell was seen on. Well, I didn't put that in my story, and there's nowhere else that's saying that. So where's your source of information? Well, funnily enough, this group won't front it up. Same thing when they say that Interpol was down there, they've got nothing to front that actually up. So they're saying a lot of shit which they're just not backing up. So it's a story which is getting us all concentrated on pedophiles and making conspiracy theorists look like fucking mad tea party fucking nutters, which I kind of think is the second tier about what the story is actually about. And I imagine at some stage there will be a backlash, and these are the things that will be focused on. Be another reason like, oh no, social media is so dangerous because this is what can actually happen on it. And I will point out, of course, that social media did actually have a large part for actually, exposing the Epstein situation, and citizen journalism does have its part. And as you can see with myself, I've actually, using the same thing that citizen journalism does, but I actually am like a good citizen journalist, actually making sure that my stuff can actually be backed up. This group is not, and unfortunately, that's what we intentionally be focused on that, and that story will end up being pushed aside as a nutty story. When in actual fact the real point of the story is about what are all these CEOs attached to big data, big tech, AI, 5Gs, weapon-based companies doing down here in New Zealand. And this is the thing that this group is not talking about. So I find that very particularly interesting. And of course the fact that we now see that the Murdoch media group can be found in the background stirring this shit up actually just adds to that whole kind of like, this is the group that's not particularly very credible because they're actually, it's just looking very, very fucking shady. Of course, the other Amazon connections which we talked about in previous videos I talked about was the planes that have flown into Dunedin. They've been linked to, from various, as you see in my posts, to what we call the 0.01%ers, and specifically to companies that are involved in big tech, and AI and 5G, and people that are also using the coronavirus crisis to actually bump up their own market share, which a lot of that's also going on with the big data stuff. So that's really the story which, really we should be going, well, what the fuck's going on here? And, so that's sort of happening. We also had the other planes that flew in. Of course, was the Jeff Bezos plane was actually sighted in first Wellington and then Christchurch, and was going down to fly down to Queensland, where again people turned around and said at the time, they've been backed by these, Eagle police helicopters. Nothing was ever supported that allegation. We did find 2 black helicopters, which we trace back to a New Zealand company, and it makes sense if you're a billionaire, you have an entourage and escort. This is all part of that situation. Key point here, of course, is that we can confirm that Amazon is in New Zealand. We can confirm that Jeff Bezos has been in here. So this is all part of that whole mixture of the resources that are all going into it. Of course, what will probably happen as a result of this little, mad tea party is that there'll be more security will be actually put on around the whole marinas during the America's Cup, which will make it harder for us to actually find out who actually is in the country, so that we lose that opportunity. And of course, it'll be used to make us all look like complete nutters, and people stop paying attention to these very big, billionaires that are investing in New Zealand because they want New Zealand to go in the direction that they want it. Whether or not that actually suits us, that's another particular question. So that's the nutshell. The highlights, of course, is the fact that the cyanide actually has got nothing to do with the marina. It's to do with property next door. It's to do with leaching of the material, which I did by actually, going out and actually checking my sources and going to the fire department and finding out, talking to the right people, said, oh no, actually that's great, yeah, there's something going on down there, oh, you need to talk to this man. I spoke to that man, and he's on the speakerphone at the other end as I'm talking to him, talking to other people who are saying, oh, no. So there's no chance that there's a subterfuge, because you can see very much by the way that they're speaking to me and how they're speaking to each other that they don't think there's anything you know, they're not trying to hide anything. They've been quite helpful. And as I said, you know, the key thing, of course, is that they're talking about people saying, oh, they can smell. They keep saying, oh, they can smell it. They can smell it. Well, go and look for yourself. Cyanide is not a chemical you can actually fucking smell, or it's a very faint smell of almonds. So whatever's been pumped out of there is clearly not cyanide. So again, we'll go back to this sodium hydrochloride. I think was basically not cyanide. It's hydrogen, is what I think they called it. So there we actually have it. No big deal that these guys are actually doing is they're jumping onto a story which was covered actually 5 months ago. This boat's been here for 5 months ago. You know, if you do want to play the thing that did capture my attention was that, of course, that June 22nd is one of the equinox periods yesterday. The boat, the Dancing Hare, does have the strange esoterical connection that Dancing Hare is all linked into a whole druid area, and of course that same sculpture does turn up on the Michael Hill golf course in Queenstown, which again we mentioned because the Beast is a boat that is also next door to this boat. All these things are very interesting. Yes, they are probably leads that we should be looking into, but the key thing is it's one thing to state something, but unless you can back it up, you probably shouldn't be saying it. You don't do the people who are trying to break these stories any favours, because all you're doing is actually clouding up with a whole bunch of horse manure, and you don't do yourselves any favour. So that's my 5 cents on the note, and I'll leave you all to it. Have a good day. And remember, if you're going to say something, please make sure you can back it up with some facts, some documents, some sources, and that's what I would do. Everything I ever turn around and do, if I find something, I've got to find 3 sources to actually back it up, and I list those sources where they actually are so that my readers and viewers can see it and they can check it out themselves. This is what the other group who are tied to these shady United Nations people are not fucking doing. I am going to be doing some stories in the near future, looking at some of the political parties that are out there at the moment, because there's all these sort of groups that are chasing the 5G, 1080, you know, and with legitimate reasons to do so. But there's a lot of very shady money and people coming into that particular voting demographic that are trying to latch hold of it. And unfortunately, when you track it back to it, tracks back to some very vested interest groups, which are very keen to get us stirred up about these things which make us all look silly, while actually smoothing over the bits which we really should be focusing on. Ben Vidgen from Deadline Newspapers.